The first question many parents have when they consider teaching their children at home is, am I qualified? Parents do not need a teaching degree or a certificate to qualify as a good teacher. They only need to be literate and committed to the homeschool process. They also need a loving concern for the overall development of their child's well-being.
There is a myth that only certified teachers are qualified to teach children. Number one, homeschooling has blown that myth right out of the water. We have found that homeschooling parents, the majority of whom have never been certified teachers, have their children scoring 15 to 30 percentile points above the public school average, where there are certified teachers. Number two, within the research on homeschooling, we have compared children of parents who have ever been certified teachers to children of parents who have never been certified teachers. We find absolutely no difference. They're both scoring high.
A one-on-one tutorial situation is just hard to beat in terms of its effectiveness and its efficiency. And so you've got this unbelievably rich educational environment where the parent can tailor the curriculum toward the interest and the learning style of the student. And to me, it's like this explosion that's ready to happen. You've got all of the elements that make academics excel, and then you've done it in this atmosphere of love and trust where the parent really knows the child and knows his interest and knows what he's interested in. And it is just this explosion waiting to happen in terms of igniting the child's interest in learning, in life, in professional growth and goals, in just every area of the child's life.
There are many resources available for homeschooling parents today. There are homeschool organizations all over the country that have proliferated over the last few years. In this state, there are literally 200 support groups to support parents who are homeschooling. Great for homeschooling parents who are just starting out. Our organization provides conferences, introductory workshops, extracurricular activities, speech and debate classes, opportunities that may not be available to homeschool parents if they're all by themselves.
I think it's very nice to have a veteran homeschooling family or mother or organization that you know you can call and ask, how did you do this day after day? What do you do if this curriculum doesn't work? I've got this child with special needs and I'm clueless as to how to teach him to read. I don't know how to teach high school and how to get my child into college. And so if you've got somebody coming along beside you that can provide you with the vision and the advice so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel, it is really a helpful thing.
I think it's realistic in talking about homeschooling to realize that there may be times when it's not a good idea to homeschool. And I know for us, we've been homeschooling over 20 years now, and at the beginning I just thought everybody should, just automatically, and that if you were called by God to raise children, you should homeschool them. The reality that I've seen is that not all families can really do that. And some of the ways that I've seen that it would probably be a hardship is if there's a lot of upheaval in the family. It might be very difficult to do that. But I also think times when you know you don't have control of your children, they probably wouldn't listen to you. If the discipline in the family is such that you don't think you could get their attention long enough, and I think that's would be a main thing you'd have to work on first in a family, is obedience and attentiveness in order to be able to homeschool. We've also seen families where the husbands and wives have not been in agreement, and it's always been our counsel that wait until you're both in some kind of agreement, maybe not perfect agreement, but I think that it's not a good idea for a wife, for example, whose husband doesn't think it's the best thing for the children to pray and to wait for the right timing from the Lord.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things that I think has been so encouraging to us as we've been doing this for so many years is that it's really possible to do. You don't have to be super qualified. You can be a regular mom or a dad without any special training at all except the love you have that God's given you for your children. And you really can do this. There are lots of things that say you can do this. God says you can do it. The state laws in all 50 states say that you can do it. And it really is possible. Even though you might not feel qualified or you may feel inadequate, it really is possible to do this because God is going to enable you to do it.
If parents have an enthusiasm for learning and follow a few simple educational guidelines, they will motivate and encourage their children far more than is possible in the average public school classroom. After determining that you are qualified to teach your children at home, it is important to find out about the state requirements regarding homeschooling. Homeschooling is legal in all 50 states. Over 1 million children learn at home, all within the framework of the law. The right to home educate is protected by numerous provisions of the Constitution. These include the freedom of religious exercise, freedom of speech and philosophic belief, the right to privacy, and the right to parental liberty.
It doesn't matter what state you're in, it doesn't matter what season you're in. It can be 1982, it can be 1999, it can be 2010. The Constitution of the United States applies in all places, at all times. And so as long as we have the Constitution of the United States, parents have, in fact, the right to homeschool. Now the question is, can we get the government officials to recognize that right? And we've been pretty successful at that. And so, but as a matter of what are our rights in reality, we have the right to homeschool our kids.
Most states are not interested in prohibitive or intrusive regulations on home education. Parents can freely teach their children completely within the law. Although homeschooling is permitted in every state, it is important to find out what state regulations may exist. The daily interaction between parent and child allows most home educators to accomplish an incredible amount of teaching in only 3 to 4 hours a day, even less in earlier grades.
If you've got a mother who is beginning at the beginning and has a first grader and several preschoolers, she doesn't need to be particularly daunted by the task, because if you've got one first grader that you're homeschooling, probably in an hour and a half a day of the real sit-down formal instruction, you can be through with your homeschooling, because it's one-on-one. You're keeping the child on task. You're not waiting for 30 other children to answer. You're not teaching to the middle and hoping the kids that are too quick aren't bored and too slow aren't missing everything. And so it's a very targeted form of instruction and very, very efficient time-wise. As the child gets older and you have more children that you're teaching and you enter the high school years, then of course the task becomes a little more comprehensive in terms of the time commitment. But there again, as the child moves into the high school years and has become an independent learner and you're no longer teaching the rudiments of reading and writing and arithmetic, and they've become very mature and independent in the learning process.
Research shows that students in public schools are only exposed to about 2 hours of direct teaching instruction during a 5-day period. And out of that, an average of 7 minutes a day involves teachers' responses to individual students.
You can be the greatest teacher in the world, and there are lots of them out there. But if you have 30 different personalities to work with, their strengths, their weaknesses, their needs, the challenges that surround them, just the challenge of knowing 30 people intimately so that you can give them what I call the tutorial advantage. It's an impossible thing to do.
Homeschooling is not expensive. The median amount that families spend per child per year for home education is about $450. This amount may vary from family to family, but surveys have shown this to be the average. This amount includes textbooks, tuition for part-time classes, field trips, and special resources. When compared to the high scholastic achievements of most homeschooled children, this relatively small expense is definitely a worthy investment.
We have our children. We have influence. We know who they're around. We know what they're doing. We're not worried about drugs. Our concerns about violence are substantially less. We know what they're being taught. We're the teachers. We have a good handle on their curriculum. So we're really happy with the overall benefit. So for us, life is a sacrifice of trade-offs. You pay something, you get something back. In our case, we're putting in an investment in time, money, and energy, and we feel we're getting it back in the nurture, stature, and character of our children.
Because home education is so time and cost effective, responsible and organized parents can successfully and competently teach all their children at home. Many families have homeschooled as many as 10 or more children simultaneously with great success.
Many families homeschool 6, 7, 8 children. My parents homeschooled 6 of us. And there are some difficulties there, but also some tremendous benefits. For instance, you get more cross-age contact between the older children and the younger children. Often the older can help the younger in their homeschool activities. Also, you'll find that as the older children get on in their school years, they can become a lot more independent of their parents' assistance. Also, what's very key to realize in large families is organization is extremely important. The more organized you are, the easier it is to handle the large families. The key thing is there are a lot of benefits to large families homeschooling, as I can personally testify.
For us, homeschooling a large family is homeschooling in general. It's a way of life, how we deal with a large family. We have a buddy system where the older children help the younger children, and we apply that at dinner, in malls, and we also try to get them to help each other in school as well. We also try to be creative. Homeschooling for us is a way of life, and if you take that approach that everything is a learning experience, it doesn't matter whether you have 1 or 2 children or whether you have 9.
Parents who want to teach all their children at home must be willing to make a long-term commitment to each and every one of their children. This often means modifying your lessons to meet the individual needs of your children's different learning styles.
One of the great things about homeschooling is we can maximize God's principle of individualities built into each one of our children. We can tailor-make the curriculum for the child's learning styles and his abilities. So this is what we've done in our curriculum. We also have picked curriculum that matches our religious convictions. That's something that's very important to us. We want to make sure our children have a good, solid biblical foundation for all of their studies.
The dedication to meet each of your children's educational needs also extends to children with special needs. Parents who choose to homeschool children with special needs must be prepared for the tremendous effort that is required. But these parents seldom regret making this decision.
A lot of times people think that a child with a disability needs to be with more professionalized care. My husband and I feel like at home we can see her needs better than a professional even could. Although she's able to see her therapist more than she would be in the public school. I'm able to take her swimming more. And she's just, I feel like in the home she's able to learn life skills of how she can be more independent and take care of herself and not depend on someone to help her all the time.
There are no canned curriculums for special needs children. That's why we call them special needs. Each child is unique, and what we need to do is become students of our children, that we study them, we see how they learn, we see what makes them tick, we see the best way to get into them, and that can be done through prayer and observation. So what we do, and thousands of other families as well, we take normal curriculums and we break them down. We present the material slower, bite-sized pieces. If our children are getting frustrated, if we're getting frustrated, we better stop, back up, keep it simpler, take a simpler, smaller step until our child has success.
The joys of watching your child grow and develop far exceed the difficulties. Parents who teach their handicapped child at home are often more successful because they know their children best and are able to better meet their immediate needs.
Parents have the primary qualification for training their children, and that primary qualification is a loving heart towards their child, to want to see the best for their child.
Children learn from other children. They imitate and compete with each other. So what happens to children when they are taken away from their peers for the better part of the day? Popular opinion assumes that children need to spend large amounts of time around others their own age to be properly socialized. However, research has proven differently. Studies have shown that there are 2 main types of socialization: positive and negative.
Socialization is a double-edged sword. It cuts both ways. There's positive socialization and there's negative socialization. A lot of parents worry about their children picking up bad habits and bad vocabulary and bad attitudes. That's the negative side. The positive side would be for them to learn proper manners, respect for others, to just become all the things that we want them to become as they grow older. And if you stop and think about that process, it points to the passage in Proverbs 13:20 that says, "Those who walk with the wise become wise, but a companion of fools will suffer harm." Now, that's not to say that all the other children out there are all foolish. This is not a matter of elitism or those kids aren't good enough to be around my kids. All children in their immaturity are what the Bible would call foolish, that foolishness is bound up in the heart of a child, and it requires discipline to remove that foolishness. So what we're left with is the potential to organize our lives and order our lives so that as often as possible the younger and less mature are walking with the wiser, the older, the more mature. And the result is our children learn the right attitudes, the right behaviors.
Socialization in the public school environment is not real socialization. What we have found with our children, because we interact together as a family, and we get together with other families and interact with different age groups, and they sit down and speak with their grandparents, with other elderly people. They learn how to take care of the toddlers, that our children are truly socialized because they can talk to anyone on any level.
I can spot a homeschooler 9 times out of 10 without ever asking them or knowing anything about them. I was sitting across the table just the other night at the conference, and there were 4 adults sitting there, my wife and one other couple. And then a teenager from the conference came and sat down next to us, and I said, let me guess, don't tell me, you're a homeschooler, aren't you? She said, how did you know? I said, because homeschoolers feel more at ease with adults. They're better socialized than people who are always associating with 5-year-olds when they're 5 and 13-year-olds when they're 13. They have the full orb, parents, children, society, to associate. They're better taught, they're better adjusted, their values and their education don't conflict because their values at home are the same as the values that are being taught. I think it's a perfect situation.
On average, they score higher than public school children on tests that measure self-esteem and sociability.
There was a study a few years ago by John Wesley Taylor that compared, it was about 200-some homeschool kids to 200-some public school children. They found that the homeschool children, 50% of them were above the 90th percentile, only 10% were below the 50th. So they were blowing the charts.
If there were no other reason to homeschool other than the positive effects of socialization, we would still homeschool. We're that convinced that it helps our children.
And homeschoolers are able to choose how they will spend their time with their peers. Quality time is often much more important than the quantity of time children spend with others their own age. Most of all, a loving home environment is the best socializer a child could possibly have.
But as we've been doing this for some almost 20 years now, one of the things we've seen is that all of the work, the effort, the tears on some days, and the things that you've struggled through, it really is worth it when you see the fruit as the children grow older. We've seen in many, many families we know, as well as our own, that children have the background they need to go into the world, to go into society as good citizens as well as missionaries to that world, to that society.
Recent studies have found that 74% of home-educated adults have taken college-level courses, compared to 46% of the general population. It also found that almost 100% of homeschooled graduates were likely to have read a book in the last 6 months, compared to 69% of those who did not have an education at home. One survey question asked, "Are politics and government too complicated to understand?" Only 4% of the homeschooled adults answered yes, compared to 35% of the general population. When it comes to community activities, such as coaching a sports team, volunteering at a school, or working with a church or neighborhood association, 71% of home-educated adults are involved, versus 37% of the general population. For 18 to 24-year-olds, 76% of the home-educated were voting, while only 29% of the general population in that age group was voting. Perhaps the most noteworthy statistic attests to the fact that while over 50% of Christian youth who attended public schools renounced their faith and/or quit going to church within 2 years after high school graduation, of those who were homeschooled, 93% continued to attend church. The influence of homeschooling on children, families, the church, our communities, and our country is a significant testimony to the positive benefits of home education. These statistics should provide great encouragement to current homeschoolers, as well as those who are considering home education for their children.
I think as varied as the avenues are for homeschooling, what young people do when they're through with high school graduation is just as varied. And so we've got kids that are doing well in everything from Ivy League to community colleges. I'm hoping that each family will pray for where the Lord would have their student when they're finished. And so whether they go on to be a wife and a mom, or to have their own family business, or they've gone to college, or they've gone into vocational school, all of those avenues are open, into the military, all of those avenues are open. And I think the children are bringing young people, they're bringing a really strong work ethic, a really strong confidence level. I think they're well, like you were saying, they're good citizens, they're well-grounded.
Because average homeschooled children are better socialized than their peers, they are able to give more attention to academics. They spend less time dealing with peer pressure and more time concentrating on their studies.
There have been dozens, if not hundreds, of studies done that relate to the academic achievement of these children. And what we find over and over again, whether it's state-specific in Montana, whether it's Oklahoma, North Dakota, Florida, South Carolina, or whether it's nationwide studies. I've done 2 nationwide studies. I did a nationwide study in Canada. No matter what you look at, these children are typically scoring at the 65th to 80th percentile. That's 15 to 30 percentile points above the national average in public schools.
The very fact that home educators are topping the lid off of test scores, I mean, on the standardized achievement tests, as we measure them by percentile rankings, and that's basically just a comparison to the rest of the society. Overall, on average, homeschoolers are doing better than 3/4 of the students in the nation. The very fact that employers are seeking them hand over fist, colleges are actively recruiting them, home educators must be doing something right.
I don't know other people's experience, but as a Christian college professor, I have highly gifted students academically, come from public schools, come from Christian schools, and come from the homeschool setting. There is a difference, though, and it's a little bit surprising. The homeschool students seem to be the ones who are most enthusiastic about the kind of education that they've received. Well, I think the homeschool students are most enthusiastic about their education because many of them have had the opportunity to direct it. If they wanted to invest a tremendous amount of time in mock trial, for example, well, their parents took them to mock trial tournaments. They were able to use their school time during the day studying for mock trial and that kind of thing, and therefore they were able to really move forward in that arena and become successful. Another reason I think homeschool students seem to be enthusiastic about their education is that their parents take their interests and use those as the basis of teaching them all the subjects they want them to learn. So what some people call delight-directed education really is true, at least to a certain extent. Obviously, there are some things we all have to learn, and they may be painful. But homeschool parents seem to have learned how to help their children learn based on the things that the student really naturally loves to do. When they get to college, then it's much easier for them to select a major, much easier for them to find good mentors, to decide what classes they're going to take, and to get internships.
We have found that all of our kids that we've had tested have tested above average. Now, some have been way off the charts. Some of them have been a lot closer to average. You know, not every one of our kids has been way out of the ballpark. Some of them have been fairly close. None of them have been below average. Now, that's so far the way it goes. If we had a kid that tested below average, would we quit homeschooling? Absolutely not. I've talked to people and they say kids who test low in homeschooling usually test worse when they're not. But our experience so far is all of our kids have tested above average, and a couple of them have been in the top 1 or 2% nationwide. So we've been pretty excited about that. They haven't all been real high, but that's not why we do it. We do it for the values. We do it because we control what they're learning, and we get a chance to expose them to the real world a little bit at a time.
On average, homeschool students in grades 1 through 4 perform 1 grade level higher than students in private and public schools. The gap widens even further by the 5th grade. By the 8th grade, the average homeschooled student performs 4 grade levels above the national average. Even more telling, students who have been homeschooled their entire academic lives achieve the highest overall scholastic scores. The latest test scores reveal that homeschool students are consistently scoring better than 80% of all their peers. And these scores are opening the doors to countless opportunities.
Being homeschooled, having a high SAT, having all the extracurricular activities, it really magnified the scholarship money that I was eligible to receive.
Homeschoolers are being accepted by the best colleges and universities. They often receive academic scholarships based on merit.
The question of college, will I be able to get in? Of course you'll be able to get in. Colleges are licking their chops for young people that have the kind of independent thinking skills that home educators have. In fact, they're actively recruiting them.
Homeschoolers pretty much can get into any university they want. Even Harvard has opened their doors pretty wide for 10, 20 homeschoolers they admit each year, and the homeschoolers are thriving.
According to statistics, homeschoolers are consistently scoring above the national average on ACT and SAT tests. A score of 23 out of 36 is the average ACT score for homeschool students. This more than qualifies them for admission to most competitive universities. A home education is the perfect environment for developing the many skills and abilities necessary for a successful college career.
If the children are trained how to be given a task and then to follow through and complete that task so that they have the joy and the reward of a job well done, what happens as they continue on in the home education process is that they become self-motivated. Mm-hmm. And our son, who's now 28, when he was 16, was asked, and it was somewhat of a hostile question, why he liked home education. And he was able to smile, and he said, well, because I'm not going to have a teacher standing over me the rest of my life, but I want to continue learning for the rest of my life. So if I can learn the basic skills and learn how to read and to research and to put my thoughts together and to write them down and communicate them, I can continue learning for the rest of my life. And it not only communicated his philosophy beautifully, but it did quell a hostile question very quickly.
The resources available to parents today have transformed the conventional image of a homeschooling family. What used to be a couple of kids with workbooks open on the kitchen table has turned into well-organized homeschooling cooperatives. Homeschoolers take advanced math and science courses and are able to participate in many extracurricular activities. 10 years ago, the choices were limited. Today, they are endless.
On the academic side of homeschooling, the most important question for any family to think about as they're getting started is what are they going to teach their children? What is the curriculum they're going to use? And unlike what the situation was when we started homeschooling in the early 80s, there are hundreds of choices and alternatives and permutations that are available today. And I think that the best thing that people can do is to listen to a handful of people that have been using material. Not just one, but 5 or 6 people, but definitely get some information, look at the material, read some descriptions, but find out from some experienced people why this works and why it works for them, and to see how your children match up with their children.
I think another thing to realize is that you're going to change. what you think is best for your family in homeschooling in the first year is probably going to be very different than what you use in the fourth year or the 8th or the 12th, because you change, you mature, your children mature, you have a better idea of what you can handle as a family, of what's comfortable for you as a family. And so I would encourage parents not to be intimidated by the wealth of material out there, but to find something that's comfortable for them the first or second year and to go for it, and then realize that they can change.
Have fun with your children. Don't worry about academics, don't worry about reading, don't worry about writing, don't worry about arithmetic, don't worry about socialization. Just go have fun with your kids. If you have fun with your kids that first year or 2 years with homeschooling your children, you'll be floored about how much they've learned about reading, writing, and arithmetic.
In order to determine which homeschooling materials best meet your needs, base your decision on the following: the ages of your children, the subject matter being taught, the number of children you will be teaching, the learning styles that your child finds most effective, the time required to prepare and teach the material, the varying abilities or special needs of your children, the motivation that certain methods may provide for each of your children. By basing your choices on these considerations, you will be able to choose the materials that are best suited to your homeschooling situation. Educational materials and curriculum primarily fall into 4 categories: traditional, home designed by parents, unit study, and classical education. Traditional. These are textbooks and accompanying workbooks designed for use in conventional schools. The advantage of traditional curriculum is that the books can be reused by younger children again and again.
You can get books from a traditional school publisher like Bob Jones University Press, or a backup book, or one of the good, strong Christian publishers, Rod and Staff, is available, that will offer you a complete line of the kinds of textbooks that are used in Christian schools. Then you have several other options. Along that traditional line, you can actually go one step further and get involved with a correspondence program. That's a program that will actually give you the lesson plans. You'll pay a tuition fee, you'll send the work in, or samples of the work, highlights, exams, that type of thing. You'll get it graded by someone at the headquarters office. They'll do your records, they'll do your transcripts, even give you a report card, and some of the programs will even provide a graduation for you. So you have the full-fledged Correspondence School Academy.
Self-paced, or home designed by parents. Parents may use a mixture of the traditional, self-paced, and unit study curricula simultaneously or at different times. The advantage of a home-designed curriculum is the customizing that can occur for the student. For example, one textbook publisher may be strong in math or history, while another might focus on the language arts or science.
It works best for us to use different curriculums and to adapt those to our individual children's needs. So we basically end up designing our own curriculum based on each child's learning style.
Parents can select their choice of materials for each subject and create a strong, more well-rounded curriculum for their child.
I think that's the key thing about homeschooling, is that you can work toward each child's strengths and weaknesses, bolster the weaknesses, capitalize on the strengths. And there's a lot of flexibility no matter what approach you choose to do homeschooling. You still have the freedom to do whatever you need to do to meet the child's needs.
And that's both the fun and the challenge of homeschooling, is how to provide that. And in any family, all the children are different, so maybe what works for the oldest won't work for the next born. So it's quite an adventure.
Unit study. This is a lesson plan that merges or integrates several academic disciplines under the study of a single theme or topic. The advantage of unit studies is that when they're properly prepared, they require less teaching time than separate lessons on a variety of school subjects. Students enjoy seeing the application of various subjects to a certain topic or field of study.
Unit study programs really are interdisciplinary. What they do is they enable you to take some theme, either correlated to a magnet of history or a magnet of scripture or a character quality, something that's right at the core, and then all the subject matter kind of works its way out from that core, and it relates to that center. The ideal benefit in that is that a family is able to teach everyone together with that kind of format. What they do is they have individualized projects in history and literature and Bible and government and music and art and all these different subject areas where you're working with content that are appropriate to the various age groups. So everybody is really in the same topic at the same time.
Classical. While there are variations of classical education, at its core it depends on a three-part process of training the mind. The early years of school are spent in absorbing facts, systematically laying the foundations for advanced study. In the middle grades, students learn to think through arguments. In the high school years, they learn to express themselves. This classical pattern is called the trivium.
Classical education is sort of a return to how our founders, the founding fathers of America, were taught. It tends to be in three parts: grammar, rhetoric, logic. There are different stages that match the stages of a child's development, mostly in thinking and their ability to comprehend, and then to be able to produce something because of what they've learned. And there's a strong emphasis on Latin, for example, strong emphasis on classical reading, which is where it gets its name. So perhaps Plato or great classics of Western civilization would be included. And I think it's appealing to people who want a very solid, almost a prep school kind of approach, or just they're attracted. Maybe the parents themselves would like to be able to have the opportunity to be exposed to this literature. So there's several curriculums. It's both a style of teaching and a way to purchase certain curriculums that would match that.
Parents do have a vast amount of resources at their fingertips, but they will have to overcome some obstacles in order to teach their children at home. Some parents may lack confidence when faced with making so many decisions that will affect their children's future. Choosing a curriculum, developing a teaching approach, setting up a schedule, doubt in their ability to teach, these decisions can feel overwhelming. But as your family settles into a routine, homeschooling becomes as normal as sending your children off to school.
Many parents, when they start out homeschooling, they do lack confidence. But I tell them just jump in, because eventually you will be confident in what you're doing. You'll see success.
Our generation needs to learn is not to be afraid of the unknown and not to be afraid of making mistakes. I think the way we were raised in the public school is if you missed one, it was marked off in red, and we're incredibly afraid of the unknown and we're incredibly afraid of making mistakes. But this is life we're talking about, and so you make mistakes and you learn from them and you move on, but you're doing it in the context of working with and for your children. And even the mistakes then become a wonderful process in the teaching and learning mode.
Another common obstacle homeschoolers face is a low level of commitment. Homeschooling should not be approached lightly. Without a high level of commitment, homeschools face a greater chance of failure.
It's very important to count the cost before getting into homeschooling. It does require a commitment. For many families, it requires sacrifice of finances, time, emotions, these sorts of things. The rewards are incredible, but also realize that there is a commitment required to homeschool.
I like to say homeschooling may not be for everyone, but it is for anyone who will make the commitment to learn with their children, to change their lifestyle, to incorporate this method of training can be successful. So if embedded in the question we have, can anybody really pull this off? Yes, anybody can pull it off if they're committed to make the lifestyle changes. Home education is a lifestyle. It is not just a school choice.
Parents should not consider homeschooling merely out of convenience or because they have other friends who are doing it. Success will be much more likely if a high level of commitment is maintained from the very first day. Other obstacles include fear of being unable to work with your children, not enough time or energy, finances, even social pressure. But as homeschooling continues to enter the mainstream, these obstacles will become less and less prominent.
It's easy to as they say, grow weary in well-doing. You educate your children, you see that it's hard. They aren't necessarily progressing above your friends' children who are in schools, and their lives seem to be better. There are always temptations. There are financial pressures. I think that as a family, we look back on our early homeschooling experience and say, the hard times were the best thing that ever happened to us because we just committed ourselves to push forward, to go through with it. You never feel good if you're running a race while the race is actually taking place. You know, however, if you've trained for it well and you've committed to run the race all the way through to the finish, that the finish is glorious. So always keep the finish line in mind.
Homeschooling is a time-tested alternative to traditional public education. It demands not merely time and energy, but a sense of direction and a plan. It will take commitment, prayer, and a little experimentation. But if you stay focused on the overwhelming rewards, you will find that the experience is a great blessing and a wonderful journey for the whole family.